We have 23 pairs of chromosomes that we have inherited from our parents. 23 coming from our dad and 23 coming from our mom. This makes up the 46 chromosomes that make you and me. But what if a person has an extra chromosome? When a person is born with a 47th chromosome, that person has a trisomy disorder. My niece, Megan, was born with a trisomy disorder. Megan has an extra copy of her 21st chromosome. This is called Trisomy-21, or better known as Down syndrome. Today, I will be informing my audience about Trisomy 21, also known as Down syndrome. In order to explain more about Down syndrome, first I will explain who discovered Down syndrome and when the genetic cause was discovered. Second, I will explain the types of Down syndrome and how they are caused. And third, I will explain that with proper care and education, that children living with Down syndrome can lead full and happy lives. First, a brief history. From the National Down Syndrome Society, Down syndrome received its name from the English physician Dr. John Langdon Down, who first identified the syndrome and published the first accurate description of someone with Down syndrome in 1866. According to History of Down Syndrome, Dr. Down would refer to the syndrome as Mongolian idiocy or Mongolism. Stanford Children's Health says a majority of people born with Down syndrome have smaller ears and smaller mouths, which make their tongues appear larger, along with smaller noses with flattened bridges. Because of this and other similar facial features with Mongolian persons, Dr. Down grouped this group of patients with people from Mongolia. Although Dr. Down is the first physician to describe the condition of Down syndrome, it wasn't until 93 years later that French physician and geneticist Dr. Jerome Lejeune identified Down syndrome as a genetic condition, according to globaldownsyndrome.org. The genetic condition identified by Dr. Lejeune would recognize that people with Down syndrome had 3 copies of the 21st chromosome versus the usual pair of chromosomes. That was just a very brief history in Down syndrome. Let's move on to the types and causes of Down syndrome. As a geneticist, Dr. Lejeune, his research would identify the extra copy of the 21st chromosome. Because of Dr. Lejeune's research, today we know that there are actually 3 types of Down syndrome. All have to do with the 21st chromosome. Dreamscapefoundation.org lists the 3 different types of Down syndrome as mosaicism, translocation, and trisomy 21. Mosaicism and translocation account for 5% of persons with Down syndrome. Both of these are very rare. Trisomy 21, on the other hand, accounts for 95% of persons with Down syndrome. This is the type of Down syndrome that my niece has. Quoting from Stanford Medicine, sometimes an error occurs when the 46 chromosomes are being divided in half. An egg or a sperm cell may keep both copies of the 21st chromosome instead of just 1 copy. If this egg or sperm is fertilized, then the baby will have 3 copies of the 21st chromosome. We don't know what the exact cause of why this happens, and the Mayo Clinic states there are no known behavioral or environmental factors that cause Down syndrome. Now, those were just the 3 types of Down syndrome and the cause, really lack thereof cause of Down syndrome. Let's move on to the care and education. Dr. Brian Scotto, director of the Down syndrome program at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, was quoted in U.S. News as saying, "Contrary to some public beliefs, people with Down syndrome never stop learning. The functional skills can still be obtained and improved on well into adulthood." This is something that my family knows to be true and factual. My niece, Megan, was born in August of 2001. My sister-in-law says, caring for Megan requires us to slow down a bit. She requires a little more TLC on the daily basis. Nothing can be rushed. Today, at almost 19 years old, Megan loves to dance, and she participates in the Special Olympics Unified Basketball Showcase, where she was pictured in the February edition of the Stockton Record. Megan still requires day-to-day care from both her parents. Megan continues to thrive and learn at her local high school. Megan attends Tokay High School in Lodi. With the assistance of an aide, Megan attends semi-regular and special education classes. Life skills, including everything from social behavior to some homemaking skills, are included in her special education classes. In conclusion, we have discussed Dr. Down, who was the first doctor to identify patients with this syndrome, and geneticist Dr. Lejeune, who discovered that Down syndrome is genetic and not at all related to one single race. Second, we discussed the different types of Down syndrome with mosaicism, translocation, and Trisomy-21. Also, we have learned that there really isn't a cause for Down syndrome. It's nobody's fault, it's just genetics. Finally, we discussed education and care, or at least my niece's education and care. All children, whether they have Down syndrome or not, learn in their own way. As my sister-in-law says about my niece, people with Down syndrome deserve an education just like everyone else. Theirs might just look a little different.